Hello and welcome. I am Laura Cragun, an intuitive eating and latter-day life coach. This podcast is for women who want to ditch diets, find body acceptance, and discover food freedom. As a fellow woman who wanted to lose weight for years, I know how it felt to be trapped by diet culture and at war with my body. Through my own hard work and struggles, I finally found a solution that helped me break free. The plan to get there: intuitive eating coupled with life-changing lessons of mindset overhaul and the gospel of Christ. I promise that as you follow these things I teach you here in this podcast, you will find happiness, peace, and most of all, freedom from the war with your body. So let's jump in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have Crystal Haitsma here today, and she is an intuitive parenting coach. And we've just had a lot of fun even before we press record here and just talking. We are both coaches. We understand how these things go, and we're very passionate about what we both do. And I can definitely tell. I love her intensity. I love her passion behind what she's doing. And I knew I wanted to interview her because we match that same intensity, but that she has actually something very close to my heart and what I want to get better at with my own parenting. And I know it'll work for you as an audience as I share with you guys that this will be very helpful for you because it's all things intuitive. And if you're listening to this, you believe in that and that you have to go within in order to solve outside. And it's much better to get yourself that help rather than sending yourself to your kid to therapy. And I knew I was in those shoes. So I'm excited to talk to her today. So welcome, Crystal.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just had a post all about that. It is so much more effective to spend your time and money on your own healing instead of continuously putting your kids in therapy because they model behavior from us. And if they're just going to go to therapy and then come back and keep modeling, the behaviors that we don't want them to be modeling that we're showing them, it's going to be literally a waste of money. So it's much more effective within the parent-child relationship to do the healing in the parent first, and just to notice the changes that happen in your kids over time. Like a lot of times you'll find that nothing more is needed. In my situation, my kids' behavior improved so drastically that we don't use we don't need any therapy, medication, whatever. I mean, I do homeschool, so I have to give that caveat because it can be really tricky for, kiddos to sit still and listen and pay attention and all of those things. But, for us, it's been hugely effective. And for my clients also, the work, I'll introduce myself a little bit, but the work that I do is combining life coaching tools like intuition and processing emotions and beliefs and all of that we do here with what I call connection-based parenting, radical connection. And what that means is parenting through role modeling, parenting through connection, instead of rewards and punishments and consequences and timeouts and all of those traditional tactics that we have used to control our kids in the past. And that there's a lot of cycle breaking happening, right? A lot of us kind of know that we want to parent in a different way, but we're not quite sure how. That's what we call cycle breaking, is like noticing the patterns and the beliefs that have been passed down from our parents and their parents and their parents, and intentionally deciding that we want to give our kids something different. And it doesn't have to mean that we're like mad at our parents for, how they did it, because they did what they knew. I've read some parenting books from back then, and it was very authoritarian, and it was very strict and very, discipline focused. So they were getting it from all angles, from their parents, from the parenting experts of their day. So I have a lot of compassion for, what they've gone through. And I think of it as like an evolution, like it continuously is evolving to the point where now us and our generation have the ability and the tools and the knowledge, access to the knowledge to parent in a truly different way than they ever were able to. And I think of it as this like glorious evolution that we've kind of been able to get to, where we can finally do the healing that's so necessary.
There's so much hope. I love that you're saying it like that. It's just, it's over time. They were doing the best they could. We're finally getting to that day of age now where it is the time where we have a lot of knowledge. So there's a lot of responsibility that it's actually under us that we need to take. And I feel like that's probably a lot of what with preparing for the Savior's coming. Like that's, we believe that he will come again a lot of this knowledge is probably coming forth because it needs to be happening. It needs to be done. These kids need that healing. They need their love. They need the best they can from their parents to teach them and model and to heal.
Yeah. And when you think of scriptures, because you have an audience, a religious audience, I'll mention this, but when you think of scripture, they talk about how, things go to the third and the fourth generation, right? There's some verse that talks about that, like that it'll be on the heads of the parents to the third and fourth generation. And I think like we also like the healing too, like we've come down from these generations over time. And like, we're finally that third and fourth generation that has access to and power to change that, to heal that we haven't in the past. So I think it is hugely hopeful. And I think I've tried lots of different kinds of coaching. When I first certified, I was like, I'm going to do all these things, but I kept coming back to this one thing because this is like truly my why. Like if I can help moms figure this out, then they change their own lives. They change their families' lives. They change their communities. They impact people in such a different way. And I feel like it's just this amazing domino effect of like, goodness, intuition and light and love that we can spread to people.
Right. And that so you're saying there is that golden nugget piece. What is that exactly that you were saying? What if we could sum that up? Is it the self? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah,
here?
I think the healing, I think when we talk about inner healing, it's healing our inner relationship with us. It's healing our self-concept. Our self-concept is the way that we view everything in the world. So when people say something to us, or if something happens around us, any circumstance that we're going through is going to be filtered through the lens of how we view us. So if somebody says something to me that's like unkind, and my self-concept is that I love myself and I feel confident, like I'm not really going to give that any airtime. I'm not really going to believe that. I'm going to automatically see like, oh wait, that person's just hurting or they're struggling. But if I have a really awful relationship with myself, which a lot of us do if we're not doing this work, I definitely did. And I'm still doing this work. I think we all are, but it's filtered through this lens of like, they're probably right about that. Like, I'm probably not doing this right, or I probably should have done something differently, or like all of this inner negative, self-critical, self-judgmental thoughts, comparative thoughts we have about other people too. Then that just filters everything. How I see myself, how I see them, how I show up in that situation. So I think the one key would be the healing that comes when we choose to heal our own relationship with us.
I love that. I'm all about that. And it sounds like there's a lot of the inner child work. And we were talking about that a little bit before, our upbringing. Seems like a lot of forgiveness and repatterning our brains on what we'll do when those triggers come up again and again. So tell me, what would be that process for someone when those triggers come, or they're confronted with that problem once again, but then they're going to probably react. And I've loved how I've learned before, reacting is just you're acting again. It's reacting what you've already done before. So
yeah. And that kind of dives us into a whole conversation about triggers, but we often think that it's our kids that are triggering us. Like they're yelling, they're not listening, they're being disrespectful, they're throwing a meltdown, whatever it is that they're doing, we're like, it's them. And so it's very like outward focus, where we feel like we don't have any power, we don't have any control. So of course we're going to feel, out of control. So it's in those times, there's kind of twofold. One is, as you're doing the healing, to be really gentle with yourself and to do more practical tips in that moment. Like, don't say anything in the moment. When you're feeling, I call it in your red zone. When you're feeling in your red zone, don't say anything or do anything. If you need to, walk away. And it's just taking some time to breathe and to give space. I have a quote just by my desk here that I love, by Viktor Frankl. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So in that moment, just giving ourselves time and space to then choose a different, more intentional reaction. But in saying that, like, breath is really helpful. Taking breaks can be really helpful. Journaling out your thoughts can be helpful. There's lots of practical tips on that side of it, but those are Band-Aid solutions of a deeper problem of like, why am I feeling triggered in the first place? Why am I feeling reactive in the first place? And that would be more of what people call inner child healing. I call it healing your relationship with you, but it really is like uncovering inner beliefs that I have about myself, about my parenting, about my role as a mother. And when I can uncover what those are and start to do the healing work necessary, I'll find that I feel less triggered over time, that I don't find myself being as reactive. And it makes it much easier to make that choice in the moment to really pause and respond in a different way. And tangibly, what you can see is like a lady that I was working with for just a few weeks in a group program sent me an email and said that her yelling had decreased by 90%. 90%. And we'd only worked together a few times. Like this was not, weeks and weeks and weeks of work.
And it's working then.
Right. It's working. So we don't need to just constantly be like, okay, let me take a breath and let me choose how I want to react. We need to kind of dig into like, why are we not responding in the way that we want to in the first place? Like, what about that moment for us is triggering? Because it's not our kids. There's something deeper there than just the way that our kids are behaving that is a trigger for us.
Right. And I love that it is that process. Those are good things, but I love that you're saying it's kind of like a Band-Aid. I'm okay with you saying that, even though I do believe in those things, because in the meantime, some women and people, they may need that. That's maybe all they can handle. That it's not their time to go into that, but knowing that they need to at some point. And I'd say I'm definitely in that boat. I'm that person that is getting that inner child work done and looking at my own attachment styles. How I would have this upbringing, and that I was I had that anxious attachment. Now with my parents, they couldn't give that to me, but now it's going to the root. And I like that you said that red zone. I wonder if maybe you've read that book of The Whole Brain Child, and that couple that.
I have that book on my shelf, and I like people constantly are like, read this book. It's about, the zones that you talk about. I haven't read it yet, but I love everything that I've seen from Dr. Dan Siegel and from Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. And when you talk about attachment, my favorite guru is Dr. Gordon Neufeld and Dr. Deborah McNamara, and they specifically talk about attachment-based parenting. That's essentially what I'm talking about when I say connection-based parenting is attachment, because there's this one kind of realm of thinking where attachment is fixed because you had an anxious attachment when you were a child. It's like, that's it. Some therapists really believe in that. And there's research to back that up, that it's like, it's just fixed. But we know so much more now about the human brain and about neuroplasticity, and that our brains are constantly growing and changing and creating new neural pathways. So of course that would be true with attachment. Of course, we're not just going to always be, because you were this way in the first 12 months of your life, you're stuck in it forever. Like that is not what I believe at all. And so these kind of gurus are coming out to say like, we can actually have a different attachment to our kids. We can help and grow it. And like, it's never too far. I've had clients whose kids were 15, 16. They're never too old to change this type of relationship and attachment that we have with them. And in, gospel terms, of course we believe that. Of course we believe that there's always possible hope and change, and constantly, right? That it's never like we're at this spot and it's like we're too far gone. So when we talk about attachment parenting, it would be giving my relationship with myself, that kind of attachment that I needed as a child, that I can give myself right now, that I can find in my relationship with my partner. Or if I don't have a partner, I can find that within myself, typically through my connection or relationship with divine, with God, if you don't believe in God, with, the universe, but having some sort of attachment or connection that we can start to heal that within ourselves. And then we will respond, like we talked about patterns. Those patterns will start to break, and we'll respond in different ways to our kids than what we used to.
Oh, I love that. Oh, it's so exciting to hear all this. It will definitely, that Christ is the one that is going to help heal you into that. I was talking about this a little bit yesterday with someone else, that it's hard to know exactly what those points and pieces are, but if I were to sum it up, it'd be that in that moment that I maybe just had with my kids, something came out that was beyond me, and that power, I was able to handle that situation. Or something came to my mind that I knew I needed to address with my child that they needed. And the Spirit and the Godhead themselves and working, that's their main job, is to work and help with us. and giving those pieces that I feel like as a human, I can't go that further. He bridges that gap, and Christ bridges that gap. And I've noticed that between sometimes with my parenting with my son, and even with dealing with my own attachments with my parents and having that forgiveness piece. It's another part. He just is all over in it, and but Christ is in there. But it is when we get into those zones, I was saying, the red blue zone, as I've read in that book. When someone is in that red zone too much, they tend to go towards that blue zone, and that's where I was, and many women are, and this translates into the food and everything I do and the relationship with our body, because we're so numbed out. We don't even understand our cues anymore. We don't feel it. We don't feel when we're hungry or full, because you've gone too far. Not to say it's not going to be changed. And I love that it can happen. It can change. And the neuroplasticity of our brain can evolve it and make it happen over time. How great that is, thinking about all the children in the world that have been brought up in certain ways, and people are adopting, and all those foster parenting. And I was telling a friend of mine yesterday that she was showing a book that she's reading to help with trauma and with her foster kid. And I just said, good for you. Like that child is so much better off with you being a mom that's trying. And when you as a parent just decide to try, or as a woman that decides to try to even touch this work, just to touch it in the beginning.
Just to touch it. Yeah. We don't even need to do anything huge yet. And I have to mention this about attachment, just because a lot of the podcasts that I go on are not religious ones, but the reason that I love attachment-based parenting, I read this book when my kid was like, my oldest is 15 and he was probably 3 or so at the time. And I read the book, Hold On to Your Kids by Dr. Gordon Neufeld. And he talked about attachment and how our attachment is like, when we have a secure attachment, we want to be close to that person. We want to be like them. We want that love and belonging. And we choose to obey and listen and be like that person because of that attachment, that we don't need to be like forcing their behavior. It just comes naturally. And as I read that, I thought, of course, this is the way, because this models the relationship we have with our heavenly parents, with our Savior, right? If we have a healthy relationship with them, it's because we love them and feel loved by them. And it's not because we're going to like get hellfire and brimstone, that's not the reason they're not controlling or coercing us to do that. At least if we have a healthy relationship with them, that's how we view it. Right. And so when we can start to heal our relationship with ourselves and see God in that way and our heavenly parents in that way, then we can, it's much easier to start to then model that in our homes also.
I love that. Bringing it back to it's patterning after all things eternal of our parents. And we are secure with him. He is secure with us. And we just have to keep in check that relationship we have with him. And we behave and act way differently when we are solid in knowing where we are, that number one, I'm a child of God. And if that is true, and I can always believe that, I'm going to act in accordance with my behaviors after the fact.
Yeah. And I think where we kind of get this wrong sometimes is that we let these little thoughts in that feel believable to us. Like, I could be doing more. I should be doing more. I shouldn't yell so much. I haven't figured this out. I'm failing my kids. I might be ruining them, right? All those thoughts that sound useful, that sound like they would push us to change and goodness and love and light, they don't. Like, those are like, one word for that is shame. If you're having any of those thoughts, the emotion that's attached to that is shame. And I believe in causal coaching, which is think, feel, do. The way that we think creates how we feel and fuels what we do. And if you notice any of that thinking that you're having and you're feeling that, shame and guilt and self-judgment, that's where you're feeling more triggered. You're actually going to yell at your kids more. You're actually going to do less with them. You're going to disconnect and withdraw. You're not going to have the kind of relationship that you think you're going to have through like beating yourself up. And we do this in our parenting all the time, right? We typically won't like listen to those little temptations of like, go do this crazy thing. Right. But if we do listen to those, I'm not enough thoughts all the time as women. I mean, even men, I've worked with men also, and they have the same thoughts about themselves also, but that healing really has to do with like getting very specific about the thoughts that we're having about us, and then allowing the Savior to come in and heal those. right? Like we don't have to believe that we're not enough. Like I don't believe in a relationship with my heavenly parents where they're constantly looking down and telling me that I could be doing more, that I should be doing more, that I'm behind, that I'm wrecking my kids. Like that is not how they speak to me. And when I can tune into like, okay, where are these voices coming from? Like, what are these voices saying? What are these thoughts in my head? How am I showing up? And where are they even coming from? And how would they truly speak to me if they were sitting here physically right beside me? What would they be telling me? Oh. That's where the intense healing starts to come in.
I love that. That's if we can picture, I feel like this is really powerful too with what you're saying with our heavenly parents. And I was actually talking with a client about this last week, that if it's not always motivating to be like, I need to be kind to myself, but to think of how happy our heavenly parents are to look down and see us being kind to ourselves in all the different shapes and forms that we can do it, and having compassion and gentleness and just holding ourselves that way. That is a motivator for me if I need to start from there. And that's what it was for her. And he is just, I can imagine, as being a parent myself, if I see that with my son, I'm very, very happy and very, very proud of him. And I tell him, be proud of yourself that you did that. And not just to do it because he wants me to be proud of him, but I think our heavenly parents want that we're proud of ourselves for getting to that point, that we are learning that new way of behaving and acting in this world that is very shaming. So as we wrap up, let's talk a little bit more about that shaming, as you were saying. Tap into it a little bit more. How you were, before we jumped on, you were talking about how much it is just such a driver with all the negative parenting that's going on. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So I see it as the number one problem in parenting issues. And I didn't see this before until I had coached, like, I don't even know how many people, hundreds probably of people. And it just kept coming up over and over and over again. And we don't know that it's shame because we don't know what shame feels like. We don't talk about it. It's not one of the human emotions that we're very clear about. And so any thoughts that are shame thoughts, guilt is, I did something wrong. It's behavior-based. It's external. Like over here, there was an action here that I don't like that I did. That's guilt. Shame is, I am wrong because of it. It's internal. It's about me and my worth and my own humanness.
How I was
and typically we go into shame, right? That's what we do as humans. 95% of humans feel shame. The other 5% are sociopaths. So most of us are feeling shame pretty regularly. The goal isn't to never feel shame because you won't be able to out-human that part of yourself, but the goal is to become what's called shame resilient, where we can notice it and we can name it and we can call it what it is. And we can listen to those shame stories for a minute. And then we can choose something different. It's really accessing what those stories, and by stories, I mean those thought stories that we have about ourselves, and really bringing them to light, because we don't like how shame feels, that we push it down. That's when you'll see the buffering of like overeating or pornography or over alcohol, like all those things that people do come from, are rooted in some sort of shame about themselves, how they feel about themselves, what they believe about themselves. So the reason I see this as being the number one issue is that we wouldn't be so reactive and so triggered by other people's behavior, specifically our kids, if we were allowing ourselves to heal that shame. It really is at the root of everything, right? Like your kid doesn't listen to you and you're like, okay, that's annoying, I'm going to yell back at them or whatever. That's what we think it is. We think it's this surface thing, but it's always deeper than that. Like, what about your kid not listening is triggering you? Why do you need them to listen the first time? Why do you need them to listen to you right now? Is it bother you that you have to ask them 3 or 4 or 5 times? Like, what about that situation is bothering you? Because if that happened at work, if you're in an employee relationship, right, with a friend and they don't listen to you, you're probably just going to take time to be like, okay, maybe they're busy. Maybe they're in the middle of something. I'm just going to wait and come back. Or maybe I'm going to sit down here and just like pause until they notice that I'm talking to them. Or maybe I'm going to make sure I get their eyes and get their attention and connect with them a little bit. And then I'll ask my question again, right? We wouldn't feel triggered by it, even though it's exactly the same behavior. Exactly. So there's something that we're making it mean about in our parenting, right? The children should be seen and not heard, that it's disrespectful for kids not to listen, that I'm not doing a great job if my kids aren't listening to me, that it's something about me. We do this thing called personalization where we make their behavior mean something about us. right? So shame is all encompassing. It's all of those things. So it's like disentangling our kids' behavior from us, our behavior from us, as a human, as a person, of our worth, and really leaning into that and loving that. And when that lady said like her yelling decreased by 90% or whatever, I had a client that said that after a few weeks, it was because she started to be more compassionate and kind and loving to her. And on that same email, she said something that I wasn't even working on was self-confidence. And I've noticed, like, I look in people's eyes more, I feel more confident when I'm walking around. Like, it's changed everything. And it's because it started by changing her own self-concept. That is the thing that changed. And it is all through shame. So the first step that I ever work on with anybody is shame. Like, so where's shame coming up for you? What is it like? And then like, let's figure out how to move through it together, instead of just being caught in these, like, we like to kind of just shove it back in the drawer where it just keeps growing.
Yeah. It's going to actually get bigger and harder to work with over time. That's possible. And that in full circle, all these things. And I think some people get a little bit intimidated by the word intuitive because to be honest, it is a newer idea because it is all things looking inside to ourselves, but this is intuitive to make sure that we are paying attention to what is underneath, what is the old programming, what is it with shame that we're always being, that's how we're being triggered by, and the different things that are happening within.
And the intuition is the opposite of shame. If you're feeling like, oh, I don't really know what intuition means, it's the opposite of this. So when I take somebody through and we can literally process through that shame, because I do some emotional processing, when we like can move through that. And then I say, okay, now how do you feel? And they always feel like more light, more clarity, or more peace. Then what emotion or what message does that emotion have? Like, what is that saying? What words come up for you now? What ideas, what thoughts about you, about your kids, about your situation? And that's intuition. Like, that is that space of learning and growth. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Sometimes my intuition feels like I'm going to vomit, where I'm like, oh, really? That's the thing I want to do. Like, I don't want to do that. But I really believe that the more that we can like notice the difference between these two voices, between the stories that are going on there, but then also between the two feelings in our body, and learn how to move from one to the other. That's how we can get like masters at our intuition.
You're getting out of that lower brain. You're coming into that higher brain, being your best self, acting in the way you would want to and hope for, and that our Heavenly Father is rooting us on for.
Yeah.
And our older brother, Jesus Christ. I really love everything you've been saying. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's been so good to talk to you. And this work that you're doing, it's very powerful. I love how it's also very simple at the same time as you've talked about it. And it's like, yeah, that's me. And that's what I need. So that's I think like there's going to be a lot of women that are going to feel that same way. So I hope they reach out to you if you need any of that help. And I know that I definitely have learned, and help needs it. I need it for my own parenting. So we're all evolving and growing and becoming more intuitive in that way within our own self-concept. So thank you for all your wisdom. You were so wise.
Thank you.
But we will talk to you guys next week. I'll be on the podcast. It'll be just me, but every other week it'll be someone on the podcast. So thank you for coming today. And thank you, Crystal.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. And I hope today's show filled your soul and gave you the direction you were searching for in your health, life, and relationship with God. I would love to stay connected. Subscribe to my podcast so that you can be the first to know when new episodes go live. And it would mean so much to me if you would rate and review this podcast just down below. Your words inspire me and give me that boost to create more inspiring content to share. I would love to meet you on social media. Find me on Instagram and Facebook. Also, if this show really inspired you today, take a screenshot to share it on social media and tag me, or click the share button to give it to someone else that would also benefit from these spirit-filled discussions. Let us all spread the good word of the gospel of Christ and help others in any way we can. Thank you again for listening today, and I look forward to connecting with you.